Good morning, Primetime Nation. Welcome to this playoff hunt stream. I'm doing it early this morning. Got a long day ahead. I'm going ahead and knocking it out. But for the guys in the league, what's up to y'all? This is the first playoff hunt show that I'm doing. Of course, we'll be back. I'm going to get all the commissions on here before this regular season is over. But this is the first playoff bracket right here. This is the last day of week 13, but this is what the first 7 games were. Basically, this is the current bracket, but it's going to change because certain games have been played. So this is what the 7 is looking like right now. But I'm going to go to each team and give a breakdown of everybody's playoff chance. But this is the first 7 right here. This is what the initial bracket is. A lot has changed since these games have been played. So let me go to the current scheduling for the guys that's in the league while I'm waiting on this to switch over. As I mentioned before, and you'll get a better understanding of why we do this. Every league that we are participating in, after a certain week in the season, we will go ahead and no longer count. We will no longer tag those games because their season is over. So at this point, there are particular games that doesn't even really matter. We're going to break that down too, but this is just some of the breakdown of the games that are left. Of course, I mentioned it in the chat, and I'm going to show it on here. We still got a big game of the week between the Chiefs and the Cowboys later on. The Eagles and the Bears, you'll understand why that game matters a lot in the next couple of minutes. I will talk about that game. We'll see what happens with the Vikings and the Seahawks, and then of course the Chiefs and the Giants and the Patriots is another game that's going to be one to be paying attention to. The Denver game is going to be a force win, and so is the Arizona game, and I'm going to talk about those teams as well. But as I mentioned, the bracket, I'm going to go to start off with the AFC. Let me let it come up on the screen before I get started. Okay, so right now, the division is, we know the division is over with the Tennessee Titans. But as you can see, behind them, the Chiefs are currently number 2. The Jets and Bills both are tied for the division. However, they are also tied for the AFC East. We will talk about those two teams shortly as well. The Browns and Steelers are also tied for the AFC North. And then you got the Raiders that's holding on to that other spot at number 7. It says 14. That's just based off the fully rankings right now. But behind them, you got the Colts, the Patriots, and the Texans, and the Broncos, who still have a slight chance of cracking the playoffs. Do they have a strong chance? It really depends, but we'll see. That's why I'm doing the stream. I'm gonna make it clear for it to be known what is still up in the air, who still got a chance, whose season is over. So, okay, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to each team. We're gonna start off with the AFC North. Let them come on the screen. As I mentioned, that division is tied for first place right now. The Browns and the Steelers are both 7-5. They have both caught fire over the last. That division got off to a rough start to start the season, but they're both 7-5. They're gonna make the playoffs. It's just where they're gonna be seated at. One could probably be a wild card team. The other one's gonna end up making it in as a division winner. But they're both 7-5. We're gonna go to their schedules and just kind of get an idea of what they got remaining. So whoever's schedule come up first, I'm gonna do Pittsburgh's first. Because Pittsburgh is right next to my team, which is the Saints in this league. So we'll start off at the end of their schedule. First thing first, let it come up. Okay, first thing first, shout out to their big win last week against the Buffalo. This week against the Buffalo Bills. They had a shootout. He's actually have saved his season over the last couple of weeks because they were definitely in a spot that they could have seen their season come to an end, but they won the last four. They're going to have a force because the Ravens, as I've shown you in standings, do not have a chance to make the playoffs. It's just too much in front of them. They are at 8 losses. They had a game of the week. They're just preparing for the draft. I hope they still got their first round pick because you do not want to be in a position where a team that's going to come in behind that's going to benefit off of your rough season. So you're hoping that doesn't happen. But for the Steelers, after you got 2 forced wins against Baltimore, so that puts them at 9 wins on the season. But they got 3 big user games. They got to play the Dolphins. I'm not sure if the Dolphins will play that game. I know they're in the midst of a rough season right now, but then you got 2 big ones against the Lions, who is currently the number 1 seed in the NFC, and then the Browns, week 17, which is likely going to be for the division lead or possibly the division in general. So again, the Steelers are setting themselves up for a possible wild card appearance. However, work still got to be done. Nothing comes easy. It depends on how these games go. But right now, from an objective perspective, it looks like they're going to get in at minimum as a wild card team. We're going to move on to the Browns now. And let them come on the screen. Okay, so here's the scenario for the Browns. The Browns are the leaders of the division at 7-5, but they got 4 big games coming up. They got user games up until the very end, which is going to be a forced win against the Bengals. But they got the Titans, who are currently the number 1 seed and undefeated in the AFC and in the NFL. They're only undefeated team right now. You got Chicago, who's in the thick of the NFC playoff picture. You got Buffalo in week 16, then you got the divisional game against Pittsburgh. So, again, looking at what I just showed you with Pittsburgh, you need to get to at least, if he can win 2 of them user games, so in his case, he got to go about 3, I would say 3-2. If you can go 3-2 over the next 5 weeks, you probably win the division. So just giving that kind of breakdown for them. But right now, both of those teams will some way, somehow make the playoffs because they've set themselves up in a really good spot. They're the only 2 teams in the hunt for the AFC North now. The Ravens and Bengals went fishing for the season. So good luck to them. We'll see them in season 2. Moving on to the AFC South. First thing first, before I even get into their schedule, I'm going to show their standing. So the Titans, the division is over. They're the only team in the league that has clinched a division title. We're not talking about playoff appearance. They've clinched the division. Their division is over. Got my boy Chris checking in. We're going to talk about your division soon, too. Matter of fact, let me put the comments on this. What y'all said in the live moment. So, the Titans division is over. But we're going to discuss the Colts and the Texans once we get after the other teams, because there still is a chance for them to sneak number 7. A chance. I didn't say they were going to do it. It's a chance. We're going to be realistic here. But we're going to go to the Titans schedule first just to see how they're looking as far as running away with the number 1 seed. They got a 1.5 game lead. But I'll say this. If the Cowboys win the game of the week, you kind of see them setting themselves up to lock the number 1 seed up. But nothing's guaranteed. Let's get ready to go to their schedule. They got a huge game against the Browns next week in Cleveland. Then they got the 49ers, they got the Chiefs and the Saints, they got a forced win at the end of the season. So they got 12 wins, 1 tie. So basically, I say win 2 games. You can probably lock up the number 1 seed. Because at this point, the Jets and Bills both have 3 losses, the Chiefs have 2. You want to get to the 14 win mark to lock yourself into that number 1 seed. But nothing's guaranteed, so we'll see what happens. But they're in the playoffs. That's not even a question here. What they're trying to do is see can they lock up the number 1 seed. But let's move on to the AFC East, which is one of the fun races in the league right now. There's a couple of races that's going to be very fun to watch down the stretch. Let's go back to them. All right, with the East, the New York Jets and the Bills both had close losses yesterday. They both could have won those games easily. But the Jets are still leading the division. Well, boy, Commanders chicken, I heard the Commanders, man, oh man. Probably the number 1 pick. Well, if that user actually took it serious, we would be having a whole different conversation. We're going to leave that alone right now, brother. But the Jets and the Bills are tied at 9-3, and the Patriots have a slight opportunity, just like the Texans and the Colts do, and we'll come back. We'll wrap back around to them once we're done with the teams that are currently on the bracket. So we'll start off with the Jets. Okay, first thing first, with the Jets had a very close loss. Very close loss. Hold on, let me see. Every time they say we ran for 3 times. Oh, brother. Hey, man. Okay, so next week they got a game against the Dolphins. It depends. They can beat. They have a great opportunity to beat the Dolphins next week. They're gonna get a force against the Jaguars, and in the final 3 weeks are gonna be determined based. So they really got. So off top, they got 2 for sure user games, which is the Saints and the Bills for the. That's likely gonna be for the division title week 18. But that week 17 game, if that user drops 1 more game, their season is cooked. That'll be a forced win for the Jets. So again, that game hasn't been set yet because they still have a very chance of it. Let's see another comment coming in. What's up, my boy J Money Gaming? I'm gonna talk about the Cardinals because the Cardinals have a better, real strong chance at not just the wild card, but possibly the NFC West. We're gonna get to the NFC West. But again, as you see, it's going to be 2. They're going to get a force against Jacksonville, potentially against Miami. So, pencil them in at 11 wins right now. But you got 3 games remaining. So, they're in the playoffs. It's just now who's going to win the East, where you're going to set yourself up as far as the seeding and everything. So, that's the Jets situation. Let's go to Buffalo. So we're going to get to Buffalo, who also, Josh Allen had an excellent game. It would not shock me if Josh Allen wins Player of the Week, but it sucks they just lost that game in the close one. But they're going to get a force against the Bengals. That usually going to be out of time, but their season's over anyways. But their last 4 games are crucial. They got the Patriots, who it depends on what their season. Again, after this week, we'll know more about what's going to happen with the Patriots. Will their season be completely cooked or not? But the final 3 games are crucial to where they set themselves up, because they got the Browns, who are winning the AFC, currently winning the AFC North. You got the Eagles, who's in the thick of the wild card picture and division race in the NFC. And then you got the New York Jets, who won week 2's matchup, but have a chance to, you could possibly either get some revenge at the end of the season, or we'll see what happens. But they're going to be in the playoffs. So that's not a question here either. Again, it's just where they're going to set themselves up when it's all said and done. Moving on to the AFC West. I'm going to go to the status for the AFC West before I get into them. Okay, so the Chiefs are 9-2. They're in a really solid spot to hold on to that division title. The Raiders are 7-5. They got a big win against the Chargers. The Broncos are 4-6-1, but they have a force. They're going to be 5-6-1. But I will break down the Broncos situation coming up too. The Broncos are still pretty alive as far as this race. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're done either, because, again, it really depends on what happens with these other games. So that's what we're going to get into. But we'll start off with the Chiefs. The Chiefs could potentially set themselves up for the number 2 seed, but they got work to do. Okay, so they got a game of the week against the Cowboys coming up. I'm going to turn the comments off really quick. They got a game of the week against the Cowboys coming up this week. Then they got the Texans after that. Again, it depends on the Texans are, that game will be mentioned. They're playing for their playoff life. If they lose, it's done. They can forget it. But they got a forced win against the Chargers. And their last 3 games are big user games against the Titans, who currently have the number 1 seed. If they want to shake up that AFC seeding, beating the Titans will do it. But then they got the Broncos and the Raiders at the very end. So they're setting themselves up to make the playoffs. Now, I don't think that's a question here. It's just now where do they set themselves up as far as the West, as far as the seeding in the AFC. We're just going to see. But looking good for them right now. They're 9-2. Again, they got a game of the week later on today, and that's going to help either strengthen or make the division race a little closer. We'll see what happens. As far as the Raiders, so currently, the Raiders will have 1 forced win guaranteed. Again, the Chiefs could give them some help next week by beating Houston. That'll lock 2 forced wins up, put them at 9 wins. But they still got 3 crucial games remaining. You got the Broncos next week, where they lost too close a few weeks ago, as you see above in week 10. Week 15, they got the Eagles, who's in the NFC playoff hunt. And then you got the Chiefs at the very end of the season, who they beat earlier this year. So probably 1 or 2, 1, maybe 2. I think the goal in the AFC needs to be to get to 10 wins. Really, I think it needs to be the same on both sides, but I'm just giving a hypothetical number of 10 wins. Really need to be what can save the playoff spot for them. Okay, now that's the teams that are right now in. There's 4 teams who have an outside chance of getting into the playoffs. We're going to go one by one to them. Wrong spot, my fault. Let me go to the Broncos schedule. Okay, so the Broncos are currently, let them come up before I get to talking about them. So the Broncos are currently 4-6-1. They got a force this week. They play the Raiders next week. They play the Packers following that. They got a force against Jacksonville. They got a force against the Chargers. So let's go ahead and count up those 3 forced wins and put them at 7. So 7 right now is the threshold, is the bottom of what the AFC playoff picture is right now. Should they beat the Raiders next week, as your wins come up, you're gonna jump the Raiders. But next week is big. If they lose to the Raiders, it makes it hard for their playoff picture. So it's the Raiders and the Packers game that's big for them that's coming up. They got to win against the Jaguars. Like I said, they played the Chiefs week 16. They didn't get a chance to play the Chiefs in week 11. So it really depends on if they're going to, if they see a real chance of locking in on the playoffs. That's what it really comes down to. So we'll see what the Broncos do down the stretch. Let's go to the Colts. Now let's get down to the Colts. The Colts won in dominant fashion this week, 47-7 against the Texans. Okay, let's get real about this thing. They got 2 forced wins against the Jaguars. That puts them at 7 wins. Again, similar to Denver, they're at the threshold of how many wins you can have. But they got a couple of games remaining. That Texas game, again, if I'm the Colts and I'm the Raiders, I'm rooting for the Chiefs to beat the Texans and eliminate them completely next week. That's what it comes down to. So you still have the 49ers and the Seahawks game remaining. If you can possibly win them 2 games, you're looking at 10-7. That's the truth of the matter right now. They have a shot, but we're gonna see how it plays out next week. Again, the Chiefs beating the Texans will help kind of settle things for the whole division in the AFC. So we'll see. I keep mentioning them, so I'm going to go down to the Texans. We're going to talk about their schedule. They put themselves behind the 8 ball. They were 5-4. They've lost their last 3 games. So now they've put themselves in a really bad spot as far as making the playoffs in year 1. They got the Chiefs, the Cardinals, and the Raiders back to back to back. If the Chiefs win on next week, their season is cooked. There's no point even trying the rest of the game because you got the Cardinals, you got the Raiders, you got the Colts at the very end. They might as well get ready for the draft. So again, next week is their make or break for the season, or they're eliminated from playoff contention. And last but not least is the Patriots. I mentioned them also earlier. And then we're going to move on to the NFC. So their game hasn't been played yet. They got a game against the Giants that we'll see what happens. I don't know if they're going to fare them or whatnot. Now, here's the scenario. If they were to win against the Giants, they got a bye next week, which they can go into that Buffalo game with a slight opportunity to still make the playoffs. Once again, that Giants game is what determines what happens with the rest of the season. If they lose, if it was a fair share and they lost to the Giants, this season is over. 8 losses is not putting you in the playoffs at this date. So, might as well forget about it. What if they win? They got the game against the Ravens and the Dolphins, week 16 and 18, that could save their season. So, we got Duke checking in saying the Pats going home. Sorry. I have no comment to that, sir. But you heard it from the Bills first. Week 15, if he gets the win, he's going to try to send him home. We're going to see what happens. But this is the last team that's in the picture for the AFC. We're going to move over to the wild NFC. The NFC is a mess right now. And you're gonna understand what I mean. First, I'm gonna go to the standings before I do anything else. Okay, so we're gonna be honest about their whole situation right now. This NFC playoff picture is a complete mess right now. Because let's look at the standings. Right now, the Lions are the number 1 seed. They swept the Packers. So they are in a good spot to win the NFC North. But Green Bay get in at the 5 spot. You got the Cowboys and the Eagles, who I'm going to talk about their games and their schedules shortly too. Both of them should be in. So that's what's that? The Lions, the Packers, the Cowboys, the Eagles. Every other spot can change. And you're going to see what I mean by that. The Bears, they're sitting at 83, but they need to win this game against the Eagles bad. If they drop that game against the Eagles, oh no, man. I'm going to show y'all. You'll see what I mean in a minute. The Falcons are currently 8-4, but you got the Panthers and the Saints on their trail. They both beat the Falcons recently. However, this would have been even more interesting, but the Rams upset the Panthers yesterday. So the Panthers had a real opportunity to be a half game out of first place going into this next week. However, that don't mean the season's over. So let's see what happens. But let's see what division they make us start off with first. That's going to be the North. Okay, so the NFC North, the Lions currently at 10-2. They're looking very good as far as winning the division now. They got a sweep in the game of the week against the Packers. The Packers are 9-3. They're gonna get in as a wild card team, but they're probably done as far as the division. The Bears, they're 8-3. That's all I can say about that. They're 8-3. You'll see what I mean in a minute. They got a lot of pressure on their hands. But we're gonna start off with the Lions schedule first. We're gonna work from first to third place on that one. Okay, so first thing first, big win for the Lions yesterday. The Lions are trying to get that number 1 seed. But, okay, let's go to their remaining schedule. They got a couple of good games left. They got the Cowboys next week. They got the Rams week 15. They got the Steelers week 16. They got the Bears week 18. They're going to want some revenge on losing to the Bears early in the season. It's one of their 2 losses they lost this year. So, but again, you already got one force coming up against Minnesota, and you control your destiny as far as the number 1 seed now. So let's see what happens. But if I'm the Lions, so I'm gonna put it like this: I think 13 wins is what's gonna get the number 1 seed in the NFC. But next week against the Cowboys at home, it's gonna shake up a lot. If they lose that game, man, oh man, the NFC really gonna be up in shambles for who gets the number 1 seed. They're in the playoffs. That's not a question here. Again, they're trying to lock up home field advantage, but they gotta do some work. Moving on to the Packers. Go to the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are sitting at 9-3. They're the 5th seed currently in the NFC. They lost last week, but here's where it's going to get real interesting. They have forced wins week 17 and week 8. But they got 2 games against the Bears. The Bears season can either be made or broken in them 2 games. What you do not want to do is allow for the backside of the NFC wildcard playoff picture to jump into this race. Or you're going to have a problem if you're either. But the one thing that's going to be a saving grace for the Green Bay Packers is they got 2 forced wins in the last 2 weeks. So they're at 11 wins. Now let's go to Chicago. Oh, my man. Let's go back to... Okay, so they haven't played their game yet. Boy. Let's talk their schedule. They have a game against playoff teams the rest of the way. That's the reality situation for the Chicago Bears. The Bears gonna have to be battle tested the rest of the way if they're gonna make the playoffs this year. They got the Eagles, who is right now sitting behind them at 7-4. They got the Packers 2 of the next following 4 weeks. You got the Browns, who's leading the AFC North, week 15. You got the 49ers, who currently leads the AFC West, week 17. You got the Lions. They got to win 3 of these games. They got to go 3-3 at worst. They go anything less than that, there's a strong possibility in this playoffs. Strong possibility. They cannot afford to go anything worse than maybe 2-4 over the next 6 games. And these are not easy games, by the way. They got to lock in. That loss to Pittsburgh hurt big time. Because if you were sitting at 9 wins, you probably just needed maybe 1 or 2 to be good. But now, you made it a problem. As far as the NFC North, well, I don't think you really have that strong of a chance in the NFC North right now, but you want to keep your wild card spot in place. So that's the state for the Bears. The Vikings, their season's over, unfortunately. We'll see them season 2. We're going to move over to the NFC South. Let's move to the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons are currently 8-4. They got a clutch victory against the New York Jets yesterday. They need it because if you look at the NFC South, the race has grown very close. Carolina 7-6. They lost a heartbreaker to the Rams. Had they won that game, the NFC South could be in a real shakeup. It's still not over though. Believe me when I tell you, it's still not over. And New Orleans got a big win. They got to 6-6. So it's 3 teams in the hunt for the South. But again, everybody got their certain scenarios that's going to either help them or break them. Let's go to the Falcons first. And also as a Falcons fan, you know it's tough for me to have to play my team in the division, but here we are. So first things first. Week 14, well, they are probably relieved that they won that Jets game. Because as you saw, they have been on thin ice the last couple of weeks. They had a 1-point win against the Dolphins. They had a 1-point win against the Colts, but then they lost 2 divisional games against the Falcons, against the Bucks and the Panthers. Wrong. Against the Panthers and the Saints. But now, let's look at the remaining games that's left. They got 1 force against the Bucks, put them at 9 wins. However, the remaining games are big. They got Seattle next week in Atlanta. They got the Cardinals at Arizona. You got the Rams We don't know what's going to be the state of the Rams at that point in the season, so that could potentially be a forced win. We'll see as we get deeper into their schedule. And you got week 18 at home against the Saints. So if you're the Falcons, honestly, 11 wins to win the South. You need to win 3 of your last 5 games. You can win the South that way. You cannot let the South get much closer than it is already. Because if you do, the season is over. Honestly. Can't let it happen though. Moving on to Carolina. Now Carolina put themselves in a bad spot last week. Well, this one put it to you like this. Had they won the Rams game, the Panthers would be a half game out of first place, which would have been big for them. But they come off a bye to play the New Orleans Saints week 15. That could shake up a lot as far as the South. But they got the benefit of 2 forces against the Bucks. They're at 9 wins. Whatever happens with Seattle, that could potentially be another force win. We'll see. Again, there's still a lot of scenarios open in the West, so we can't just pencil Seattle out until it happens. Now, Seattle drops the fair sim against Minnesota, their season's done. And if they lose to Atlanta, their season's even further cooked. So that's what it boils down to as far as their situation. But for Carolina, if they win week 15 against the Saints, it's a high possibility they get 3 consecutive force wins to put them at 11-6. And if they get to 11-6, the Falcons have a very, very tough pill to swallow, because guess what? They could be bounced out the playoffs if the Panthers win the division. So you cannot let that happen if you're the Falcons. You better handle your business. Last but not least, the New Orleans Saints. They got a little tougher road. They've come back and got a couple of big wins. They got based on my scenario. So I got a force this week against Tampa, but I have all my user games remain at this. I got Carolina week 15, the Jets week 16, the Titans as undefeated week 17, and the Falcons. So hypothetically, they really need to win out. Or at worst, go 3-1 in the music games. If you go 3-1 in the music games, you can set yourself up to possibly fight for that wild card spot. But you drop 2, the season's over. You just got to try to get a good record at the end. So it's close, but hey, we'll see what happens. But that's it for the South. Now, the West, boy. On paper, the West appears to be over. But the 49ers have dropped some games down the stretch that has made this division closer than it should be. Because now, everybody got a chance in the division. So, the 49ers are 85. The Cardinals are 5-6. The Seahawks are 5-6. The Rams are 5-7. I'm about to make it clear of why this is a problem now for the West and the 49ers user. Let's go to the 49ers schedule first. They lost, and just to give a heads up of what happened, they lost their last game against the Browns. So they're on a bye next week. Coming off the bye, they have the Titans, the Colts, the Bears in the last game of the season against Seattle. Now, let me make this clear about that Seahawks game. Seattle could potentially be a forced win based on where they're standing at that point of the season. But even with that being said, that's 9 wins. You got the undefeated Titans week 15. You got the Colts, who I mentioned to you earlier, that are in the thick of the playoff hunt. Yeah, It started with the Cardinals' loss. After the Cardinals lost, they got smacked by the Panthers at home, and they lost a big one on the road at Cleveland. So the division was looking like it was over. They were 8-2. But they've made this division way closer because of that scenario. But now, let's see, man. So, again, they got the Titans, the Colts, and the Bears. Those are guaranteed 3 games they got to play. Seattle is going to depend on what happens within the next 2 weeks. If Seattle finds a way to win against Minnesota and Atlanta, that could be another game to be played. And just to give you guys context on that, Seattle won week 1. So, keep that in mind. They're leading the division, but it ain't a safe division lead no more. And why is that? Let's go to the Cardinals. So, chat, guess what? The Cardinals are going to have 9 wins. Remember I said that the bare minimum in the West is now 9? Well, look at this schedule. The Cardinals got 9 wins. Because again, as I stated, 8. If the Texans lose that week to the Chiefs, that's 9. As I stated, they cannot afford to lose any. They got to get at least 500 if you're the 49ers. Because if the Cardinals beat the Rams next week, by the way, that's going to possibly be game of the week coming up. So just keep y'all heads up. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna make something. It's gonna have some significance in that game. We're gonna talk about it though. But if they do win that Rams game, the Houston game could potentially be a force. They could eliminate the Rams, and there could be a scenario where only one user game is left to be played. The Cardinals could be 10-7, if not 11-6, if you don't tighten up. Here's what that does. That jumps the Niners who win the West. Yes, it's that strong of a possibility. They've put themselves in position now to possibly win the NFC West. And I know Justin's probably watching the streaming shop. You probably think the division was that close, but it is now. So 49ers, you better handle your business, or you might have the greatest collapse already in primetime history. Moving on to the Rams. And I'm going to Seattle first. Again, as I stated, the Seattle game really depends on what happens with this situation with the Vikings game later on. So, if they lose that game against the 40, if they lose that game against the how will I put this? If they lose that game against the Vikings, the rest of the games really don't matter. But they're going to be scheduled to play the Falcons next week. They're going to have to play the Falcon game. But as you see, they have 0 forced wins coming up. They got to earn their way in. Last but not least, the Rams. And as you're going to see, the Rams is in the same scenario. Ain't no shock. I gave them a warning for season 2. We gonna compete as you should. Yeah, it's a high possibility that the Cardinals can come back and win this division now. But let's get to the Rams. The Rams, they got to beat the Cardinals next week to keep their season alive. But the one thing that the West is going to have a lot of games against each other coming up in the next few weeks. So Cardinals twice, Seattle. The outside of the division, you got the Lions and the Falcons. The Lions and the Falcons can also end the Rams' slight opportunity at still having a shot at the playoffs. Again, gonna be an interesting finish. But as you see, the Rams went from completely out of this picture to 5-7 in with a slight chance. That's why I say the NFC is a mess right now. But let's move on to the NFC East race. Oh, here come the Seahawks. The Cardinals need to come get their team. Heard, sir. We hear you. Okay, moving on to the West. NFC East. The Cowboys currently 8-3 on a 5-game winning streak. They're trying to set themselves up to win the division now. Tab said the Bengals in 5, so that what should be the 5th pick in the draft. Been a rough season over there, brother. You gotta lock it in that draft. Okay. So the Cowboys are 8-3. The Eagles are 7-4. They had a controversial ending to their game last week. So, but again, I think they're both safe as far as the playoffs. You're going to see their schedule shortly. Now, once again, for the ones that's watching, if you are out the playoff picture, but you like, man, I'm about to play the rest of the way, you better mention it or that team's going to get a force. So, let's start off with the Eagles. The Eagles got a big game against the Bears this week. That can shake up the playoff picture. They could dump the Bears and get into the 6th spot. But they got 3 force wins coming up. They got the Commanders, 2 force wins against the Commanders, we all know who's the say. And then the Chargers. So they're at 10 wins. They're going to be in the playoffs. As far as the NFC East is standing, don't know. Bears, Raiders, Bills still left. Those are the playoff teams that are still in the hunt. So they got 3 forces in 3 games left to play. They got to handle their business over the next couple of weeks for that to change the scenario. Now, the Cowboys. Game of the week is coming up. Ooh, jam. The Eagles are the first team their way to the playoffs. Nice. Nice. The Cowboys. The Chiefs. They got game of the week against the Chiefs. They got the Lions. The remaining 4 games are forced wins. Dallas is in the playoffs. What can happen with them is going to depend on these next 2 weeks. They could very well be in the hunt for the number 1 seed as well. That in mind, the Skull might be the number 1 seed if the Lions slip up next week. So the next 2 games are big for them. But regardless, even if they drop these next 2 games, they're gonna have 11. They're gonna have 12 wins at minimum. They're in. So salute to the Cowboys. You're in the playoffs. Congratulations on that. But that's every team. I broke it out every team. I'm gonna go back to the standings one more time. I'm gonna show y'all this number 1 seed, number 1 pick race. Show y'all the top 10 teams in the race right now. So Commanders looking like they got number 1 pick locked in, with the Bucs sitting at number 2. Man, but see, hey, it's games. Mm-hmm. It's just the way the schedule's set up. But the Chargers currently right now looking like they're gonna have the number 3 pick. The Dolphins, Jags, and Giants are tied at the shot at having the number 4 pick. So right now they're 4, 5, and 6. The Bengals and Ravens. The Bengals are gonna go down one spot because they won against the Ravens. So they're 4-8 as well. The Broncos is 4-7. Again, a lot of this is going to change after the week, though. So if you're taking for that number one pick, well, I can tell y'all right now, number one pick is over. It's only two teams to fight for number one. That ain't happening. But as far as getting into the top five, let's see what happens. But as you see, that one pick is done. That one pick is done. I'm gonna go back to the bracket one last time. I'm about to wrap the show up. But again, I gave y'all the breakdown of what's gonna happen with this playoff hunt. It's up to y'all to lock in. Good luck the rest of the way. And like I said, 2 of those games are big that still remaining. So advances tonight. Good luck.